Hi, hi everybody. Are you listening to me? Is everything all right? Well, thank you very much for being here. My name is Leo Branco. I'm an editor at Exame, and I'm glad here to be with you and with Aron from Kushki to talk about investments in Latin America. We're facing a winter of startups over the last months, but trend is changing, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to invest here in Latin America, and we're here to talk about that. First of all, I would like Aron to introduce himself. Aron is from Ecuador, currently lives in Miami, and is an entrepreneur in a lot of countries. So, Aron, introduce yourself.
My name is Aron Schwarzkopf. As they mentioned, I'm from Ecuador. I started my first company when I was 19 years old. It was a payments company that ended up being sold to a bank in New York. And then I started my second company, Kushki, which is a payments company only for Latin America. And it's been one of the fastest growing payment infrastructure companies in Latam. So yeah, that's a little bit of me. I'm also an angel investor and a mentor in places like Techstars, New York Angels, among other venture capital funds.
Good. Aron, can you tell everybody what Kushki does? I mean, you're a leading company in payments. You're working with cross-border payments. So what does Kushki do different from your competitors?
Yeah, so Kushki is the first regional payment acquirer in Latin America, and it's completely full stack. So that means that all the code is new, and it doesn't need to rely on very old infrastructure that was created in Latin America around the 80s or 90s. And it's built for all of Latin America at once, right? So we have operations in Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Ecuador, among other countries as well. And it's a single infrastructure to be a pillar for anybody in the digital economy to be able to move money very easily and to accept money from their customers very easily. So that's what Kushki does in a nutshell.
Good. And how's business going? I mean, Kushki is a unicorn right now, right? So you have raised some money, and how's everything going over the last months?
Yeah, so Kushki is growing very, very fast in every way we measure it, right? And transactions we process and people that work at Kushki in general. And I think it has a lot to do with like the trends in the times in Latin America. Latin America was the last place in the world to have very bad financial infrastructure for payments. In most places, this is usually a commodity or something that, is just a given that you just plug and play to. But in Latin America, it was really bad, and that was the reason that, cash usage was really big. And in the last years, you're actually starting to see a trend in Latin America where cash is really disappearing in many countries. Brazil being one of the leaders of that. I've been here all week, and I haven't seen a single real, physical real, which is it's fantastic.
Yeah. All is about Pix nowadays in Brazil. These instant payments.
Yeah, in general, every payment in Brazil is growing. Pix is the most famous, but even the traditional Visas and Mastercards are doubling every 2 years in terms of usage. So in general, like very mundane cash, old school ways of paying is disappearing completely around Latin America. There's a huge adoption wave into digital payments.
And how long you've been living in Miami? You lived in US, you lived in New York, then you moved to Miami. How long have you been living there?
I've been living in the United States for maybe 15 years in general, and today I kind of live in a plane. So I was in Chile last week, in Mexico the week before that, in Ecuador about a month ago. So I feel like Miami is a great hub destination for entrepreneurs that have a very regional LATAM business. So it's been very good for us. Since we moved to Miami, we've been much easier to kind of manage so many countries at once.
And it's a growing ecosystem in Miami, right? With lots of funds going there, lots of buzz around what's happening in Miami. And I would like you to talk about what you're hearing from VCs in Miami and elsewhere in the United States about the reality here in Latin America, especially in Brazil. What do they think of investing here?
I definitely think that the time to invest in Latin America is now, right? Both for entrepreneurs as well as for venture capital funds. It's a very gloomy world out there today, especially for fundraising, except for places like in Latin America. Latin America is one of the only ones where actually everything is growing, right? Including dollars invested. 2021 was a record for Latin America, but it was a high of dollars invested everywhere in the world. 2022, which was terrible in most places in Latin America, was lower than 2021, but it was double 2020. It's just starting, So I think you'll see in Latin America more and more venture dollars coming in year over year, regardless of a bear or a bull market in the United States and in Europe, right? Because it's just the beginning.
It's just because there's lots of things to do. There's so much opportunities here in Latin America, or there's there are other things that are coming into this account.
So I definitely think there's two, right? The first one is Latin America is a gigantic region, right? And it has a lot of tech infrastructure and tech plays that have been dominated by very non-tech players for a very long time that haven't spread out that much. So there's a lot. It's like the land of opportunity for me. In any vertical you see it. And the second one is demographics, right? Other than Latinos being the most handsome and the best dancers in the world, we are also one of the best demographics in the world in terms of investing. About a quarter population of Latin America is less than 14 years old, and another quarter is Gen Z. I'm a millennial, and I'm one of the oldest Latinos, basically, by probabilities. So it's a very bright future for Latin America in terms of demographic. Unlike other places like China, Japan, the United States, where most of the population is older and it's actually contracting, we're actually having a huge expansion of population in Latin America. And for tech investors and for tech entrepreneurs, that's the beauty. Like literally half of your clients, right, for the next decade are digital natives that, will not settle for doing things like their grandparents or their parents did, right? You ask the Gen Zer to go to an ATM, it's ridiculous. They never want to go in that way, right? So, or to go to a supermarket, no, they're already used to, pressing a button and getting stuff. They're digital natives. So, in general, I feel like the population in Latin America is by far the best if you're being an entrepreneur catering to that population, or if you're investing in general. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to see the audience. Who is here has a startup? Please raise hands. Who's got a startup? Who's looking for a round right now? Just raise hands. Is there any investor here? So yeah, we do have a large group of entrepreneurs. What kind of recommendation, what kind of tip would you give to these entrepreneurs that are following us to grab that money, to grab that opportunity that you think that it's coming to LATAM right now?
Yeah. The first one is don't think how to grab money, because the money's there, right? There's a whole industry trying to invest in you, right? So you thinking how to hack into getting more money is the wrong way to look about it. And the second, perhaps especially for Latin America, is it is the land of opportunity. There's these massive trends happening here, which are like gigantic waves that you can really start surfing. Like we picked one like 5 years ago. We said, cash is going to get reduced, and most people would pay with electronic forms of payment in Latin America year over year. Find a trend like that, and don't waste your time doing small, short-sighted things. Like I see a lot of entrepreneurs trying to quote unquote tropicalize something they see in Europe or in the United States that could be a feature or something small. Like, you may be somewhat successful on those things, but you're really in one of the best markets for technology adoption. I would really be obsessed at looking at the major trends, at the things where the TAM, like the total addressable market, is growing really fast. And I would invest my time there, right? And money will come. Like, again, as I was saying, we've been used to in Latinos to always be poor and, kind of put more water in the soup so that more people can eat. But The trend of venture capital isn't stopping anymore. Like it's open. It continues to be underinvested. Per GDP and dollars invested, Latin America is the worst in the world today, right? So we still have a deficit on that, but it's growing quite a bit. Even in 2022, which was one of the worst years for venture capital fundraising, Latin America, it was almost double than what it was in 2020, right? So you'll continue having access to capital quite a bit, but I wouldn't waste my time in kind of looking at short-sighted stuff. I would look at a major trend and go and surf that trend. And if you're an investor on the other side, I actually think it's nice to do the same, right? Most companies that have grown quite a bit or have captured, you know, the biggest rounds in Latin America, they're either ecosystem builders or infrastructure companies today. Like we're an infrastructure company, right? But if you look at it, like most of like the unicorns in Latin America in the last 5 years, they're usually market makers today and ecosystem infrastructure players, right? So that's where we are in the investment cycle of Latin America. We're still building the infrastructure and the ecosystem. So if I were an investor, I'd be looking at the things that can sit right on top of these, looking forward. And for Kushki, for example, we had like a whole first chapter of our lives of building pipelines, like literally building infrastructure. And now we're launching a lot of facilities for other businesses to use it, not as our clients, but to build businesses on top of Kushki, right? You know, which was very hard to do. Like, you know, it's very hard in Latin America to say, hey, I want to start a business and be able to accept payments all throughout Latin America, or I want to build a payments business, right? You know, you had to knock on the door of every bank in every country or every regulator, and now you have an infrastructure like Kushki to do that. And it's the same in many other rubrics, right? In fintech and in e-commerce as well. Like today, if you're an e-commerce seller or you're building other things, you already have logistical partners, you already have, you know, marketplace partners that you can build regionally. So I would look at that as like, what are the next wave of companies that can sit on top of these infrastructure players that are already establishing around the region.
But Aaron, could you name like 5 hot industries that are going to benefit from that kind of lack of infrastructure here in Latin America? And you see that these industries are going to be more open for investments over the next months?
I continue to think that fintech is by far the hottest industry, and fintech has a lot of stuff in it, right? You know, we're in payments, which is like a really small sector of fintech, right? But things around insurtech, around spend management, around investment management, I think will be huge and very well adopted in Latin America, right? Because not only is Latin America been very underserved in financial services, it's also been neglected for a really long time, right? So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. But I also think that in general, in logistics, in content, with AI coming very fast, I think there will be a wave of content creation in Latin America, right? You know, which has been very hard. So I actually think that a lot of the media and content industry is very ripe for disruption in Latin America, from being tropical or, you know, bringing the name of an outlet to sell for views here, to actually building real content here, right? Using AI in a very cheap manner to reach massive amounts of audience. I think it's also a very good opportunity. And the one that I don't know if it's hot, but I really wish that happens in Latin America is material science and agricultural tech. Like Latin America is one of the biggest agriculture providers for the world, right?
Brazil's
yeah,
strong.
Brazil is a lot of their economy is exporting their agriculture, but it's the same in Chile, it's the same in Mexico, it's the same in Ecuador. So it would be nice that we start seeing some real innovation around there with doing, you know, material sciences and maybe using blockchain around supply chain and agriculture would be very nice.
Good. But Aron, you mentioned AI, and everybody's talking about AI in this event over the last three days. There's lots of fear of what AI can do, especially in jobs, especially in business, that it can just vanish completely because of AI. Do you think that these fears are good to have? I mean, they proceed, or you just have to overcome all of those fears?
I don't know if the fear is good or not, but there's usually people that are afraid of things and people that just continue living. And I'm on the continue living type of place, to be quite frank. Any big technological revolution since fire, right, can hurt us if we use it bad, or can really change our lives if we use it good. And I think we're at the beginning of that cycle in AI, and I just wouldn't worry that much about it, right? To be quite frank. I would learn about it as much as I can, and I would like to see what you can use. Like, if I'm Leo, I would be looking into AI quite a bit, because now we can build content, like a computer can build content really fast. Within a year, we'll be able to do, my daughter will do a movie, and she'll just go in and say, I want to see this movie with this actor, like this, and in a second it'll happen. So that opens a lot of possibilities. Will media change? It was the same when the internet started. People thought the newspapers would disappear forever and all this stuff, and people adapt to it, right?
Yep.
And there's definitely winners and losers of these cycles, but I wouldn't live scared of it. I actually think there's a net positive of stuff that can be used there, as opposed to a net negative.
Yeah, good. So we're heading to the final of the end of our conversation. Just a final word for the entrepreneurs that are here, that are looking for investments. What would you think? What would you say?
Just keep grinding. I feel like don't care much about what you read in TechCrunch and what's happening in the rest of the world. And Latin America is booming, in general. I'm pretty sure in 2023, early checks in Latin America will be a record historically for Latin America of doing early stage rounds. So I wouldn't worry that much reading. I'll just keep focused and executing in general.
Yep. Thank you, Aron, for being here. Thank you for
you,
your
man.
words. Thanks everybody for following us. Boa tarde.